What's up, guys? It's MetaGamesGX here, and we are going to be talking about the cards that you really should be looking to grab this format to make your deck better, whether it is branded or Snake Eye, or even some rogue deck. I feel like with the new ban list and all the bans between Appaloosa and then these cards coming back, like grass looks greener, that the game has kind of opened up a lot, especially with skill drain going to 1. So, you know, Snake Eyes isn't completely dead, but I think that overall we're going to see a bunch of new decks, which is going to call for a bunch of new staples to kind of come through. So first of all, we are going to be talking about what is the state of the meta right now. So state of the meta is currently a really wide open meta, but there's a few clear performers between the Yubel deck, the Fire King deck. Then you have classics like Tenpai and Ritual Beast, which get to utilize Shifter and really a deadly effect. So of course they're at the top of the food chain. And of course classics like Branded Despia doing still quite well. Shout out to my boy. And things like Tearlament and Fiendsmith Chimera coming through, and Labyrinth, because all of these decks can kind of use Fiendsmith very effectively. And even though the ban list hit the engine pretty hard with the Lacrima ban. So that means that things like board breakers are going to be a lot better now. So I think overall cards like Book of Eclipse, Dark Ruler No More, and Super Poly are all going to be great this format, especially in the decks that they're better in. Book of Eclipse is great for dodging things like Imperm, Veiler, and Ghost Mourner, so that your effect can still resolve on one of your monsters as long as it's not a link. And then of course things like Dark Ruler will be able to out a huge board like the Yubel, but you know, Yubel is still making Desiree, so things like Super Poly comes to mind for me as clear ways to being able to out a lot of the monsters. I was at first skeptical of Super Poly this format, but after seeing the options that you have between Dracostapelia and Mud Dragon to be able to knock off Yubel's two best monsters on their board with the Desiree and Varudris, which provides 2 Omni Negates, which makes it really tricky to break their board. So I think that these cards are very much in consideration. For that reason, I think we'll see more board breakers this format than ever. However, this will still be a hand trap format. So now that Appaloosa has been banned, the need for a new generic link for end boards has kind of really taken a foot, and luckily enough, Konami knew what they were doing and they printed Silhouhatte Rabbit, which allows decks to basically provide a clear interruption on your opponent's turn, because you're able to on link summon set 1 continuous trap from your deck with an effect that special summons itself as a monster. And also it has an interruption where you get to target 1 spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy it if 1 is special summoned. So you can summon out a trap card such as Silhouette Hat Trick, because it says on special summon you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of illusion monsters you control and negate their effects until the end of the turn. So it's really crazy in that regard, because you're able to just search that off a very generic link 2. You just need 2 effect monster. It's very crazy. So for that reason, I think that you should be picking up Silhouette Rabbits, and they're also already $20 and they're not going to be reprinted. It also has things like the Azurine statue, which the Snake Eye deck was searching out. I think that Crossout Designator is going to show its face once more, because obviously in a month we are going to get the new Raging Abyss set. So Crossout is going to be an incredible option, because we are all going to have to be remaining Molcharmi, because essentially Molcharmi Furos is going to be the equivalent of Max C back in the day, which, if you don't remember, allows you to draw a card every time your opponent special summons. Now, this one is a little bit more restrictive, but because it only covers the deck and extra deck, but most decks nowadays, especially Yubel, they go through about 10 monsters in the extra deck. So this card's going to be needed to be ran in every deck, so things like Crossout will really start showing up. So make sure to get your playset, especially come Raging Abyss. Now, with skill drain going to 1, you would think that stun decks would be completely stopped. They only really have their synchro zone, right? Wrong. There's plenty of other Floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh that they've printed. People have just not yet to use them because of the fact that they were just worse than the other options. But now that the other options are all at 1 or banned, Now we have to be looking elsewhere. So we now have options such as Tyrant's Tirade, which MCole40 mentioned, which basically lets you tribute to monsters, and then your opponent continuously cannot activate their monsters effects, which is pretty crazy overall. And overall, it's pretty easy to get 2 bodies on board. That is a large value, but also sometimes better than skill drain, because once it's active, you can't even activate the effect. You can activate the effect under skill drain, it will just get negated. You also have things like deck lockdown, which has been kind of theorized to kind of be the next thing because of skill drain to 1, because this basically says to your opponent they cannot search any cards. And I would say overall it doesn't work as well in a deck like Runic, because Runic is trying to search every turn off of Fountain, but other decks like Snake Eye, or maybe even like Yugioh, at the end of the day, once they already set their board, this could be a great capstone to kind of just help their board out. It's basically a Colossus and a spell and trap card. Speaking of Colossus, Colossus is now at 2, so you could always get another copy of that, but that's something where I'm not too really frightened about that card coming back. I would also say Mulcharmy Purrely, while it's going to be a great card for the rest of this format, I'd say if you're not running it in your extra deck, you need to have a good reason for it. But obviously it's a $50 card, so that's a pretty good reason not to pick them up. However, I think with the new Mulcharmy Fubaros come out, it will definitely replace it and be more useful. However, I think it's yet to bore out if we're going to end up running both Mulcharmies to kind of replace the Maxi package that the OCG is doing with Fubaros. We will see. I kind of doubt it. So for that reason, I would, say for the rest of the format, Fubaros is looking, or sorry, Mulcharmy Purrely is looking really good. Things like Phantasme could be pretty good too, because there's still decks linking around. Like there will be Snake Eye and Yugioh, Light Sworn, but these are all kind of roguer picks at this point. So I do think, and also against Yugioh, it's only going to give you like 1 draw at most. So I think things like Phantasme won't be as good as Mulcharmy. Also, like, speaking of Light Sworn, I would also say Light Sworn Dragonling is one of those cards that I think you might want to have around. It won't get the reprint. I don't believe it might, but if it doesn't, I think that it's going to be a really good card to have around, because it's one of the best extenders with Light Sworns. And you guys gotta remember, historically, Light Sworns have been like one of the best engines in the game. So like someone's going to find a pile where you can just throw in like some Dragonlings, a couple Wolves and Raidens, and Charge of the Light Brigades, and just call it a day with that kind of package. And plus Weiss is a Light Fiend, so that gives you access to the Fiendsmith engine. So for that reason, I think like Dragonling is just a really good card for that going into this next format. Also, DD Crow is looking to be crazy this format, in my opinion, because first of all, when they go to try and do the Necro equip by equipping Requiem to the Fiendsmith Engraver, you can always Crow the Requiem and basically stop their combo from there. But also it's great against stuff like Branded right now, especially because you can banish the 1 Branded fusion. I'll admit that up front. I think if people started running Crow, it'd be really insane against our deck. And then you also, speaking of going back to Floodgates, you have Power Sink Stone, which says each time a monster effect is activated, place 1 spell counter on it, and basically every time there's a monster effect that gets activated, it places a spell counter on it, and at 2 spell counters, no one else can use monsters cannot activate their effects for the rest of the turn. So it's almost like a Vanity's Emptiness for Power Sink Stone, where you have an active option to kind of turn it off. And it's pretty easy to proc 2 effects and prevent them for the rest of the turn. So I think this is actually a very underrated trap card right now, and this is something that stuff like Runic will, I think, definitely abuse, and might be their best replacement for something like a skill drain. And then also, of course, my favorite card of the ban list, Grass Looks Greener. If you're a Branded player like me, you are going to want to pick this up. Of course, the Infernoid players are happy, and other 60 card jank piles, and the Lightsworn and Tearlament Duelists. I think that this is one of the cards that enables a lot of fun play styles. I mean, in the game, I think 60 cards has always been kind of a deck building challenge. If you can make 60 cards work in a huge tournament, then that's kind of on the pilot for that, in my opinion. And this card just at least gives it a chance to happen. So I think that's really cool in a world where Triple Tactics Thrust is going to be a card you're going to want to have if you have a Grass Looks Greener in a 60 card deck. And there's a lot of decks that already ran 60 cards, so now we're just going to have to just throw it in if you're already running 60 cards. And not all decks are made the same, of course. So not all decks will interact with Grasslook Screener. So I think as a branded deck, that's something you are going to want to have for sure. I know a lot of people have been saying, oh no, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. But just do a test, mill 30 cards with Grasslook Screener with your hand, and then just come back to me and comment how plus did you go. Because that's essentially what the experience is going second with that kind of card and branded, which is really insane. So you kind of want to definitely have that one of those on you. Like I said, triple tactics thrust is going to be more important as ever. Of course, it's getting the reprint in the megatons, so I would definitely look out for that. I presume they're going to give a QCR, so we'll see. So yeah, guys, if you want to see more videos like this where I go over like some of the best techs and like floodgates and, you know, staples and hand traps for the format, please leave a like down below. We will be seeing you guys later.